Does everyone have Elazar's and Eliezer yesterday? This book is so
No, just in English. Oh, you're saying because the names. Okay. Here we're going to start Samach Gimel on the page on the bottom. That's 63b. 4 lines from the bottom. We thank Hashem. We're able to learn every day. And this chassav learning immediately. Okay, the Mishnah gave us a difference between Tumah Yadua and Tumah Satahim. Impurity that's known and impurity that's unknown and like covered over by something. And then in this discussion, he said that if someone goes down to a mikveh or to a cave, he finds a piece of a corpse or a corpse floating on the entrance in the water at the entrance to the cave. So then he's tamei, but if it's sunken into the ground, then it depends why he went down. If he went down to cool off, then he's tar. If he went down to become pure, then he would be tamei because we would put him on his original status. So we were talking about this thing with floating at the entrance to the cave. We said that he's tamei. The Gemara says like this. Ketzad Yarad. What was the case if he goes down? The Gemara explains that Safa. What happened over there was that the corpse was floating. But let's say something else was floating. Let's say it wasn't a corpse. Let's say it was sheretz that was floating. And the tumah that it would give off was a tumah that it was possibly touched, that the person possibly touched it. Not that he was under. Sheretz is a creeping creature. There's 8 of them that when they die, they give off an impurity if they're touched through
just
contact.
like a corpse.
Well, a corpse gives off a tumah under a tent. Or you have to go over it, or if you go under it, or if you're under the same roof as it. But this is only with touching. So we're saying that if it's floating, then we're not going to have the rule, normal rule, that if you have a doubt, if you touch something, if it's in a private domain, so we consider it tamei. We learned from Saita that any doubt about tumah, the private domain is tamei, but that's only if it's on the ground. But if it's floating, and there's a question if it was touched, then we say that it's not tamei.
So that's something we'll learn later.
That's what we're learning now. Oh, in Saita?
In Saita, yeah.
In Saita, we're going to learn about public and private domains. Well, regarding the doubt of tumah, because over there it's obvious. But the question by the Saita was, did she commit adultery?
Isn't the last unit in all of the tractates all about impurities? I forget what it's called. Yeah.
Tarif. No, the whole.
There's 5 different categories. The way this is all broken down. I think the last one.
So you're talking about the Mishnayos. There's 6 orders to the Mishnah, and the last one is about impurity or purity. But this would clearly come from there. This is what we're about to quote. Is the Tosefta of Taharis, which is one of the Mishnayos in the last order. So it goes like this. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Safek tumah tzafa. There's a doubt regarding a tumah, something impure that was floating on the water. Bein bekalim, bein bekarka. Whether it's floating in the water and amongst vessels, or whether it's floating on the water in the ground, like in a puddle. And the question is, did it touch the vessel or did it touch the person? We say that it's tahar. Tahar, it's pure. It depends what it was floating in. If it's floating in a vessel, in the Negelwasser Schissel, wake up in the morning, or there's a sheretz, so then it's going to be tamei. But if it was floating in a puddle on the ground, then it's going to be tar. We have to see what the source of this is. Basically, it needs to be on the ground to give off the tumah. It doesn't need to be on the ground. If it's contacted, then it's automatically tamei. Question is if there's a doubt. So if there's a doubt and it's on the ground, then it's going to be more problematic than if it's floating, than if it's in the air. My time of the Tanakama. What's the reason for the Tanakama? We're on top of Samach Daled. Amar Rab Yitzchak bar Avudimi. Rab Yitzchak bar Avudimi says, we have him. He comes up. I'm not sure where he is, but he comes up. He quotes the pasuk. Ksiv. No, I didn't find this pasuk exactly. I found it similar pasukim. What verse do they say it's in? I have Vayikra 11. Oh, so it's a combination. So interesting. So they quote 1143 for this. Ksiv, it says, the verse over here says, you should not make your souls abominable to shaktu. By eating any creeping creature that creeps, you should not defile yourselves with them, that you will become impure with them in the world to come. Well, that's how the commentary says. Only problem is, it looks like it's really from verse 42. Verse 42 says differently. Verse 42 says, you must not eat any snake or worm that goes on its belly, and any scorpion that walks on its four legs, any centipede that has many legs, and all creeping creatures that creep on the ground, including the beetle family, for they are an abomination. Okay. Now, notice that it said, and all creeping creatures that creep on the ground. So that verse says, on any creeping creature that creeps, it doesn't say exactly where. It says any creeping creature that creeps. Uksiv. And it also says alaretz, on the ground. So haketzad, does it have to be on the ground or not? The Gemara does this sometimes, that it reads half the sentence, and then it says, 1 second, that should be enough. And then it reads the end of the sentence and says, no, so why are you defining it that it has to be that? So it says, haketzad, how does this work? Vadai magai tame. If you definitely touched it, then it doesn't matter where it is. Safik magai. But if it was a doubt if you touched it, then it's going to be tar if it's not on the ground. So when we said any creeping creature that creeps, that doesn't need to be on the ground, that's because you definitely touched it. Then we added in on the ground, that's because you did not necessarily touch it.
Right.
And then it's still tummy because it's on the ground.
Oh, it's on the ground.
If it's on the ground and it's a doubt if you touched it, it's tummy. If it's in the air or if it's floating and it's a question if you touched it, then it's going to be tar. Hold on. Let's wait. It's not 100% clear, but the Gemara is going to get into a little bit more details.
Okay, so it's in my vessel. It's in my fleet. It's not
Floating.
On the ground. It's floating.
So then it should be tar as long as you didn't for sure touch it.
Sure, I touched it in the cleat.
Then it's tummy anyway. Yeah. If you touch it, it doesn't matter.
It's on the vessel, on the vessel.
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 Okay. Reb Shimon, my timer. What's the reason for Reb Shimon that he makes that distinction? Amarula. Ula says ksiv. It's written in the verse. Ach mayan uksiv yitma. What verse do they quote this from? 36. It says over here, anything that falls from their. Now we're not talking about the sherets. Now we're talking about a nevela. Actually, no, we are talking about the sherets. We're talking about the sherets, and it says, only a gathering of water, be it a pit or spring, will remain ritually pure, even if it comes into contact with impurity, and it has the power to purify others. However, if a person touches a carcass while he is in one of these purifying waters, he will still become ritually impure. So we start off saying that these things are pure. And then we say that it's not pure if he touches a carcass while he's in it. Starts off saying that it's pure, then we say that it's not pure.
The carcass in the
We'll still make him impure.
so no way it can become pure.
No, the carcass itself doesn't. Yeah.
Touching it.
He's touching it.
If it's floating.
Oh, so 1 second. So he says like this.
So the needle can become pure on the step, but the elephant in the hole in the needle can.
Right. So, ksiv achmayin ksiv yitma adarav maybe. How does this work? Safa bekalim tame bekarkat's tar. The reason is, why is the mayan always tar? The spring, the gathering of water is tar, because that's in the ground. What did it mean? Yitma, according to Reb Shimon, that it becomes tame. That means that if it's in a vessel. That's what it was distinguishing there in that verse. It's not the literal translation of the verse, but that's what he's deriving from it. That sometimes water is tar, sometimes it's not. We're talking about the doubt if he touched something that was floating. Tana Rabbanan was taught in a brisa, Kalani Talim Vanigrarim. It's interesting. The Gra changes it over here to changes the test to a tough, which means anything that was hanging. So you mentioned hanging. Here we're talking about something that's in the water and maybe he's fishing and he has a string and he caught a sheret and he's pulling it along the water with his rope. Nigrom, it's being dragged. Straight kantame. Since there's now, we're talking about here that while this guy is fishing in a place where people are swimming. All right. So he's pulling the sherets along. He's not sure if the sherets touched one of the swimmers. It doesn't have to be that case. It could be that there was a keli there. This could be a lot of examples. That's my example. And because there's human intervention, there's a person that's pulling it, so it's tummy. Because that's considered like it's already positioned.
But it's attached by a string.
It's attached by a string and it's floating, but because it's not floating naturally, the person is pulling it. So, or maybe the person is holding it on his hand while he's pulling it. That's nitalin, or maybe the gross version over here that it's hanging. Whatever the case is, because there's human intervention, so it's considered that it's placed down. But if he threw it, that's already flying. That's going on its own. There's human intervention, but it's not attached to anything. So then we say that it's going to be tar. So what this brisa does is it limits the halacha that we're learning about to only something that gives off tumah through touching, which is the sheret.
It's going to talk about why the sherets makes someone tummy, because right now it doesn't seem to get into that. So
Right.
Is that one of those things that's
So
out of order?
So why the sherets gives off tumah, that I don't think we know exactly. That's a rule in the Torah
Oh, okay.
that it gives off the tumah. Question is, if there's a doubt about the tumah, and it depends where the location of the doubt took place. If it took place in a private place, private domain, or a public area, that the Gemara in Saita is going to explain. We learned from Saita that the woman committed adultery most probably in a private place, not in a public area. So since that impurity comes in a private area, then we'll say that tumah in a private area is going to be doubtful tumah in a private area is assumed tumah, in the public area not. And we learn that over from Saita to even things where it's not exactly that doesn't have the same details of that. It doesn't have the same logic, but nevertheless, that's what we learned from Saita. Okay, so now we're talking about if it's floating, do we say the same rules? We're saying that if it's floating without any human intervention, then we say that it doesn't have the same rules. We'll say, even though it's a private area, we're going to say that it's pure. And then we say, but this only applies if the question is if it was touched. But if it's something that gives off tumah in another way, for example, it would give tumah through a tent, being under the same roof, or if someone went over the tumah, or if someone went under the tumah, which that applies to a corpse, or if someone was a zav or a zava, which gives off tumah not through touching, just from being on top of something. Then we'd say that even though it's floating, it's still going to give off that tumah, even if it's a doubt.
So if you want someone scuba dives or snorkel under the tent,
Carcass. Sheretz. No, you didn't touch the sheretz. If they snorkeled under a dead other scuba diver, so then
Right,
they would
different.
become tummy. All right. You follow? So it's only because that those tumas give off the tumah by going under it, or if they snorkeled under a zav. Well, a zav doesn't. It doesn't really work like that. The zav gives off tumah when he's laying on top of something or sitting on top of something, even if he's not directly touching it. So it wouldn't be just going under it. It would have to be that there's some sort of pressure on him.
Isn't a zav is someone who has like a regular mission,
Right, an irregular emission, right?
so that person would give off tumah also.
He would
The
give off
same way
tumah.
as,
Yeah, I just try to figure out how we're talking about. We're not talking about touching the zav. We're talking about some other tumah coming from the zav, but the zav is floating. Yes, it's not so simple how to imagine this. So if a zav moves something indirectly, like with holding a stick, like a broom or something, and moves it indirectly, so the zav would give off a tumah. It would make that item tummy. With this cane, he moves it, the zav would make that tummy. It's called hesed. He moved it even though he didn't touch it. It goes on the seesaw, and the other person goes up. He moved the other person, so that would be making tummy. So if this would happen somehow in water, somehow he moved it, even by indirect touching, it would actually become tummy, even if it's a doubt. It's only with the question of direct contact, which is going to be tahar when it's floating. Okay. Now we have a classic Gemara. Ready? Boy, Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama has a question. This is a classic Gemara. Meis bekeli tzafal pnei hamayim. If you have the corpse is in the water, are we really dealing with the mace or are we dealing with the sheretz? Just 1 second. Base. Sheretz. It has to be sheretz. Drop the word. Do you have mace? Do you have corpse? Or do you have sheretz? Corpse. I think it needs to be adjusted. The gra adjusted. Let's say there's a piece of a dead sheretz, probably. Just 1 second. Let's learn it like this. It's much easier. It's in a vessel, and the vessel is floating on the water. Mahu, what's the halacha? Basar keli aslinan. Do we say that it's positioned on a vessel, so therefore it's considered stable because it's not floating in the vessel? In the vessel, it's standing. Its positions, it's stationary. Oy basar, it's supposed to be maya aslinan. Or do we follow the fact that the vessel is on the water and it's actually floating? So do we say that's a vessel floating with something inside it that's stationary? Do we consider it stationary or floating? Do we look at the vessel or do we look at the item? If you say you follow the vessel, which means that the vessel is that the item in the vessel is stationary, what about, now you have to switch it again. Here it says a corpse on top of a sheretz, but the gross switches it. So a sheretz on top of a corpse, mahu. What's the difference? Given the item aser v'aitem shiva, command the machta tuma bekeli damya idilma tuma smichti. So the question was like this: if you have tuma inside, here I have water in the cup, but really there's water outside. That's what cases with water outside the cup. The cup is floating along the water, one of those little boats. And there's a sheretz inside it. The question is if the sheretz, someone touched that sheretz, but it was floating along on the water. So do we say that it's considered floating, or do we say that it's considered stationary because it's stationary in the vessel? Next case, do we say that if there's a corpse on the corpse that's floating, and there's a sheretz on top of it, do we say that it's all tameh, and therefore it's just one thick tumah? and it's floating on the water? Or do we say that no, the corpse is separate from the sheretz because the corpse has one tumah, the sheretz has a different tumah, and it's considered like the vessel? If we said that the vessel was, the question is only a follow-up. This is a flowchart. Okay. If you say that the vessel is considered, that the item in the vessel was considered stationary, now let's follow up. Instead of a vessel, let's say it was a corpse. What do we say now? That it was sitting on a corpse. Maybe that's how maybe that's how he died. The sheretz bit him. Remember that Gemara where we had a frog going over a scorpion on top of a frog that went over there? Remember that? What was that in the Dharam, I think?
I just remember you telling your kids story about fox going by the water and saying to the fish, come on.
There was a Gemara we had about that. The Gemara was saying like how Hashem does everything like so accurate. That this scorpion goes on top of a frog, and then the frog takes him across, and he right away goes across. He bites someone over there.
He said, I couldn't help it.
Oh, that was another one with the frog. Yeah, when he bit him in the middle of the thing, and they both were sinking. He says, I couldn't help it. Right. Okay. So do we say?
That's not the way they tell politically now. Say, if it's a horse that's going across, makes a deal with the scorpion.
Uh-huh.
He bites him in the middle of the river. He says, wait, we made a deal. This is the Middle East.
Yeah, I heard that.
I didn't know it was from tomorrow.
Who said my kingdom for a horse?
One of those English guys.
They said that they had this display in the zoo of the wolf will lie with the lamb. So they had a display with the wolf and the lamb in this cage. Yeah, it's a display. So someone came by and said, "How do you do that? How do you get it to, it's the times of Mashiach? How do you do this?" I said, "Oh, it's not a problem. Every day we replace the lamb." Okay. So next case. Oh, well, we didn't explain it. Given the Haitamas Erev, Haitamas Shiva, Command the Machta, Tuma, Bekeli, Damya. Since they're two different types of impurity, so the corpse is considered like a vessel. Maybe we just say it's one thick tuma and it's all floating. If you say that the corpse is considered a vessel, and therefore it's considered that it's stationary because it's not in the vessel, even though the vessel is floating. And what do I have to do over here? What's this? Hey, take out the word betami. Vadai sher keli damya. Sheretz al gabi nevela nevela tzafamau. Let's say it's not a corpse. Let's say it's on top of a piece of a dead animal. Now that's the tumah is much more similar to the sheretz. Maybe over here we're going to say that it's really just a thick tumah, and it's really just floating. Given the tavayo tumas erev, since both of them are only tummy till evening, tumas michti, so it's just one thick tumah that's floating. Idilma, or maybe haikazayas vaikadasha. What's the size of tumah that it gives off? By a sheretz, it gives off the size of a lentil. And by a nevela, it needs to be a kazayas. So there's different sizes. So therefore, it's considered like it's on a vessel. It's floating on something else. What about sheretz al gabi sheretz mahu? It's probably an intim tzalaimar in here. If you would say that it's considered separate because it's tumas erev, what about one sheretz on top of another sheretz? Hani vadechad shir. This is for sure one shir. Both the sheretz are the same. Or maybe I think they take out the light. What do they take out? They say it. Maybe it's considered like it's considered in a vessel. Okay, now the Grut takes out the following line. If you want to say that it's considered separate, one sheretz on top of another sheretz, which means that it's not considered floating, it's considered resting. Given the let's say you have a nevela, which is part of an animal carcass, dead animal carcass, which gives off tumah through contact. But this piece of the animal carcass dissolved into a liquid, became like a soup, right? The fats or something dissolved. So, do you say that it's considered that it's on top of something, it's in a vessel, or do you say no, it's in the water? Even the nimucha havale mashka, it's considered liquid and it's floating. Or do you say no, that's not floating, that's food. It's on top of food, which means that it's separate from the water. If you say that it's not, that it is separate from the water, it is considered food. Let's say this sheretz, this creeping creature, is on top of semen, and it's floating in the water. So, do you say that this is a solid or a liquid? Do you say since it comes out of the body? Two versions of this, but it's considered like food that comes out of that comes from an animal. Do you say that it's considered like just like the animal we said was considered food because it comes from the animal and it's edible? Do you say that this is considered food and it's separate from the water? It's not food. Sheretz al gabi mechatas. That's another question. Let's say it's on top of the water of the paraduma. Now, the commentary says it doesn't really matter if it's the water of the paraduma. The main idea is that it's on top of mud, like a mixture of water and dirt. Mechatas stuffing al gabi mayim, and it's floating on the water. It says lo yadinan. We don't what's it in lo yadin. We don't know, and take it. All of these questions remain unanswered.
Wow.
Although there is a rule that some of the Rishonim have that whenever it says imtim tzalaymar, if you're able to say this, then what about this? That means that the Gemara is actually accepting that side of this flowchart. Remember that bar mitzvah joke?
No.
The guy comes in, says, if you're a relative, go to this door. If you're not a relative, go to that door. If he wasn't a relative, he goes to the other door. It says, if you have a present, go to this side. If you didn't bring a present, go to that side. If you didn't bring a present, so he goes to the other side and he finds himself back in the parking lot. Okay.
So we're back in the parking lot.
Yeah. We're on top of Samach Dalet. Amar Rav Amnuna. Rav Amnuna says, Nazir v'yisip Pesach sheholchu bekever hatahoim b'shvi shalem tahirim. Nazir, which is not supposed to become tummy, but he did become tummy, and he's recounting. So he has to count 7 days, and then he restarts, right? The Nazir, and a person that is ready to do his carbon pesach. What happened was they came across a grave that no one knew about. It's called kever atayim or tumas atayim, like we were talking about before. So because they're already almost pure, they're on their 7th day. We made a distinction between if they're pure or if they're becoming pure. Remember that? We made it in the Mishnah. We said if someone's going down to the mikveh and there's a corpse that's in the body, so if he's going down just to cool off, there's a corpse that's in the ground. If he's going down to cool off, we say he's tar. But if he's going down to become pure, that's why he was going into the water, then we say that he retains his original status of being impure. So what about these two people or maybe it's the same person, that he's going down, but he's already on his 7th day. So he's basically pure already, right? He's basically pure. So the Gemara says, my time, the Gemara says, Rav Amnuna says that he's pure. My time at lemistar. This is not his first of his 7 days. You see, the Mishnah before was talking about he was going down to purify at the beginning of the 7 days, where he was totally impure. Over there we say that he remains impure. But over here, he already went the first time to the mikveh. He's going down on the 7th day. So we say that now, because he's already changed the status in the status of becoming pure, and it's already his 7th day, So we say that he's already considered out of the impurity, and he doesn't become impure because of Tumas HaTahim. Again, all of this would be a doubt. If it was a question, if he became
So,
Tamei.
but during those 7 days, when there's a certain type of tummy where it doesn't count it.
Right, he has to wait till the 7 days are up, and then he can recount his Naziris. He became tummy through a known tummy. Now he's coming in contact with an unknown tummy. If there was a known tummy, then he has to count. If it wasn't right, but whatever the case is, if he was a Nazir that became tummy, he has to become pure. How does he become pure? So he has to start the purification process, and then he waits 7 days, and then he goes to the mikveh again. So he's already on the 7th day. So we say that to break the whole process, that we're not going to do because of Tumas HaTahim, because of the unknown impurity. Masav Rava. Rava has a question. Yarad litar mitamas ameis. Tamei shecheskas tamei tamei v'cheskas tar tar. What are you talking about? It says clearly in the Mishnah that if he goes down to purify himself, we consider him still tamei. And it's clearly talking about Tumas HaTahim. It was the corpse that was buried in the ground underneath the water. The question was if he came in contact with it. Amalei, so Abaya says, I'm adding an Abaya because the Rush says Abaya. You might have Rav Hamnuna. Who responds to him? Rav Hamnuna? Okay. It could be Rav Hamnuna. The Rush says that it's Abaya. Amalei, he responds, Medina lach ben Nazir shemechusar teglachas. You see, that was talking about. That was talking about where. I'm missing something here. 1 second. Another question. What was asking that? Jimmy, we're still we're on page 64 of Nazir.
Okay, Rabbi, thanks.
I'm
with Saf.
Okay. So there's a difference between the first haircut of the Nazir or the second haircut of the Nazir. The first haircut of the Nazir is when he's still impure and he has to start the process of purification. So he says when you're starting the process of purification, then granted, you're going to retain that impure status until we know that you didn't come in contact, even if it's Tumas HaTahim. But when you're already finishing that process and it's your second haircut, did they do a second haircut there? No, they shaved his head. They waited 7 days. By the Mitzvah, they had to do a second haircut. He had to go to the mikveh again on the 7th day before he restarts. I don't remember. Did they do it? Did they cut his hair twice? He had to grow. Yeah, they did. They did. They had to cut. They had to do. He had to grow his hair. He had to cut his hair. Right. Right. The second one was to regrow. Yeah. Yeah, but he had to. Whatever the case is, he had to go to the mikveh. Let me see what the commentaries say. 1 second. Yeah, I think he had to cut his hair twice. Okay. So he's making so Rav Hamnuna is making a difference between how tummy the person is. If the person was coming out of the tumah already, is at the end of the purification process, and he's going to be tar. It's at the beginning, then he's going to be tummy. Amalei Rava, so Rava says to him, I'll also agree to you that if someone already went to the mikveh and he already cut his hair, he's ready to bake the carbon Pesach, then what does he have to wait for? He's already pure. Amalei Abaya says, what do you mean, what does he have to wait for? He has to wait for evening. He's not pure. The evening is only pure after the evening comes. He says that's not considered that you have to wait for that because that's automatic. That's not something. That's not any more that you need to do. It happens automatically. Abaya Hadarbe and Abaya also retracted from this. Now, what did Abaya retract from? Oh, from his question. Abaya retracted from his question of, but you have to wait for nightfall. And they respond to him once say, you don't have to wait for nightfall because nightfall happens automatically. Abaya says, you're right. Nightfall happens automatically. So therefore, he's already considered pure, even though he's not pure. I don't mean that he's pure. I mean that he's already considered that his status is a status of a pure person, that when it comes to Tumas HaTayim, we don't return him to being Tameh. The Tanya, where do you see this? Where do you see that the sun setting is not considered an action? It's considered something that happens automatically. So the rule is like this, that after a woman gives birth, she has to bring sacrifices. Let's say she gives birth twice. She didn't bring the sacrifice for the first one. So it depends how close they are. So if there's 81 days in between the first birth and the second birth, then she has to bring a new sacrifice. That would be, we're talking about a miscarriage. So she would have to bring, if it's a full birth, then it would be 9 months or 7 months. But let's say she had a birth and then she has a miscarriage. If it's within 81 days, then one sacrifice would cover both. It would be similar to if she had twins. She only needs to bring one sacrifice for both births.
But regardless, if she has a child, she gives a carbon.
Yeah. I'm not sure. So, Yoim Malais. The word Malais means that it's completion of the days, of the waiting days. If it's a girl, it's 80 days or 81 days. If it's a boy, it's 40 days. That's the way it worked. Because she would, the way it worked was like this. If it was a boy, then she's tummy for 1 week. And then there's 33 days of purity, which those days, even if there's blood there, she's still pure. And then the end of the birthing process is totally over after the 40th day. If it's a girl, she's tummy for 2 weeks. And then there's 66 days where she's
Always less time.
66 days of purity. You made tayar, days of purity, and then after the 80th day, then the whole birthing process is over, and then it's would restart. Possibly, but okay. Now, the Tanya, the Brisa says like this: Yoim Malais. Let's say she has a birth on the day itself. Tavi. She has to bring a new sacrifice. Now, it may mean like immediately after that day, after the 80th day, maybe the 81st day. Taich Malais, but if it's within the 80 days, then like Tavi, she doesn't have to bring a new sacrifice. Yachal like Tavi Aleida Shalifnei Malais, Aval Tavi Aleida Shalach Malais, Betiftar Mishtayim. Maybe, let's say she has 3 births. And the third birth is after 80 days of the first one, but it's within 80 days of the second one. Maybe she should have to bring 2, 1 for the first one, and then 1 for the last one. And that would cover everything. It's still considered within the Malais. It's within, because each one, it restarts the count every time she has a birth, and it could, one sacrifice could cover all 3. Amar Rav Kana explains this. Shani Hacha, the Mechzer Karban. She's, why does it restart? Because her purification process wasn't complete because she hasn't brought the sacrifice yet. Now the Gemara says, Hasam Nami Mechzer Herav Shemesh. But let's say it was Yoim Malais. If it was at the last day, even if she brought the sacrifice, well, no. She can't bring the sacrifice on the last day. She has to wait one more day. Just 1 second. There's different ways of learning this Gemara. So if she has a miscarriage on the last day of the first birth, which means the 80th day,
has a translated, she cannot bring her offerings on that day because she lacks sins.
Yeah. It says, but she can't bring it on the last day because she needs to still to wait for nightfall. So Amalei Abaya says Shimshon Mela Arva. You don't have to worry about nightfall because that's something that happens on its own. Now, the point of this Gemara was to tell us that when someone is in his purification process and he still needs the nightfall, we don't say that his purification process is not gone or it's not completed. We really say that it is completed, and the rest of it is just going to happen automatically. So therefore, if there was those things that changing his status back to being impure, that we're not going to say just because we need to wait for nightfall. Let's leave it over here.
So
We're at the Mishnah, yeah. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Shakaya.